Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Psych Crusader. With me is Jen. Thanks for coming back, Jen.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I see you got your Christmas tree up back there.
I do.
It's that time of the year.
It is.
I'm ready to see them come down.
No.
But today we're gonna go back into borderline personality disorder. This is gonna be part 2. So we're gonna cover a little bit more in depth. And so just to give everybody a quick recap, if you didn't catch the first episode or if you forget what we talked about, we covered a lot of information last time. So, and I only went through probably maybe 1.5 pages of my notes because Jen came in and she just hammered us with all the great information. And so it really worked out. So now I still have a ton of information to cover yet. So we'll go back through and we'll give a quick recap. We went over the symptoms of the abandonment. We talked about the abandonment last week and about being unstable and these different patterns that we go through. The intense relationships where generally people are they're going to struggle in relationships. Your own self-esteem, that's a big killer for a lot of people. We talked a lot about that last week where you just don't see any value in yourself. You're always trying to, find ways to get noticed by the people around you, whether it's your peer groups or your spouse or your girlfriend or whatever. You just are trying to get acceptance. You could go into paranoia, so we talked about the paranoia a little bit. I had that really bad, like the paranoia part of it. And that's suffering when you have to go through that and you're second guessing your own mind all the time. That is suffering. And I don't wish that upon people. It's a very difficult thing to bring yourself out of. We didn't really talk too much about treatments. We mainly talked about the symptoms and some of the behaviors. So, that's kind of what we want to focus on a little bit today, and maybe some of the more severe situations that, we've come across.
I know we did talk about EMDR and we did talk about DBT.
Yes, we did. That is true. I've actually done a little bit of research on both of those, and I talked to someone who actually had that done. With MDR,
EMDR, yeah.
And so I asked a lot of questions. I was like, so how did you feel? What was happening with and they swear by it. This is the future. So I'm going to do a lot more research into that because back when I was in school and going through all this, like this stuff wasn't, it was probably out there, but it was probably more experimental, treatment at that time. We were still coming out of lobotomies back then, so we don't do that no more. No, the lobotomies have long been gone, but
I think it's the DC, the DSM as well, because, now they've been able to categorize like them by, BPD is more of, a line of behaviors as to where it used to be very much, you have these emotional mood swings, you're bipolar, and now they've been able to categorize it as bipolar is when it's prolonged periods of time. Borderline will be up and down and everything within the same hour. So it's not a prolonged behavior. And so that was where they started to kind of do some research on the fact that BPD can have so many fluctuations within the same conversation.
Right. And now they can see what parts of your brain fire. I think that's unbelievable. I absolutely love that technology. And it makes me want to go back to school and be a tech. I want to do that now. I want to see all that. So that's exciting. I wasn't really much of a believer. I didn't know anything about it, so I didn't really have an opinion one way or the other. But now that I've heard how it works, I've researched it a little bit. I think that sounds like, I mean, we're not guesstimating anymore. Now we can see, tangible evidence that you can quantify, and we can develop a pattern to where we can say, okay, we know this condition does this and this condition does this, and they can narrow it down like to the T. And it's pretty,
change the way impressive. That your brain works. Like you said, like right. You can see, the way that your brain will light up in different areas as, these things, your traumas work through, especially people with complex PTSD, as you go through some of that, and so we can lessen the symptoms. We can address things. A lot of it's going to be your DBT, like following through with changing behavior, because that's the biggest thing with borderline is the intensity of emotions and lack of being able to process emotions appropriately, so that's right. Like the biggest ones on it is that you see a little bump and I see a mountain, so you can regulate in an area as to where my dysregulation is very apparent because I'm going to blow up and then feel insecure, and then I'm going to have shame because I did blow up, and now I'm going to hope you don't leave me, which is the whole reason why people leave, because that's right. A lot for anybody to put on one person, as well as asking them to go through an emotional, turbulent relationship, which by all means is toxic in itself. So
yeah, and just going back to what you said right off the bat, so they can actually alter your behavior with that method, and they just basically it's like a factory reset of your brain, and it's insane where the psychiatric technology has gone. I'm blown away. I've been blown away ever since I heard my friend talk about her treatment, and I'm like, oh, what, they did all that? They can take all these treatments and stuff. All these bad behaviors you have can just go away.
Yeah.
I mean, they can be relearned. So, but for the most part, you're not going to, the triggers aren't going to be the same.
Yeah. It's not going to be a trauma response anymore.
Right.
You're going to be able to see it in the moment and then, slow down enough to make your own choices. And that is the difference between being able to have some mood regulation and some behavior regulation, compared to emotions feeding it to where it distorts your own reality, to where in somebody with borderline, it seems to be a realistic response if it was the actual situation. But the perception is skewed with the situation. And I think that's why it's hard to deal with, because nobody can see the way that I'm looking at it. And when you can explain it's okay, but in the moment, it's not safe for anybody involved,
Right. And to kind of add to that, like people who don't live in the BPD world, in the BPD brain, it's tough for them to understand how we can go through a suffocation, a mental suffocation, but a reactive blowout at the same time. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but that's how I have felt, where I'm just suffocating, and my only way out is to react. And so that's obviously not, a productive way to do it. However, but that's how fast like your brain can change, and you get these reactions to where you go from you're backed into a corner and now you're lashing out. And that's what gets people in a lot of trouble when they have, BPD, because of those reactions, because you can be, you can be very, very impulsive very quickly. And that's never a good thing. You'll end up breaking things, or, whatever's in your way, that it's going to be a target. And you don't think, like it's so impulsive that your every move you make is an impulse.
Right.
So
it's a difficult overreaction, I think is what they say, and I think the biggest thing about it is, for people with BPD, like it's always going into it like your trust has been violated. So for me, if somebody shows up late, like, oh, I can't trust you. It's that negativity where I think it's going to happen. So I'm angry if you don't meet my expectation. And, like, I think it's the whole book, walking on eggshells, for the other people involved, not knowing who's going to set them off. And then in the person with BPD, in their mind, it's, you're out to get me. Like you said, that paranoia, like you are making this harder. Like, I swear you're like sitting there trying to poke a bear, so it's the fact that, but BPD is a result of growing up in a hostile environment, growing up, not being validated, where you were, trying to seek that praise. So it's crazy that, like you said, the normal response is anger or impulsive, negative reactions and stuff, when it's like a kid who acts out because they just want attention. And it's like the adult form of that, because that's the type of emotional maturity, because they say, we're very thin-skinned people. We're hyper aroused. We're hypersensitive to things,
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because it's a fine line between because we only have milliseconds to correct our thought process, and that's not enough time to correct the thought process. So we can go from a manageable situation to disaster very quickly, and it's a very, very tough thing to deal with. And I have had a lot. I have now gone through the years, and I know what the initial feeling feels like, and that's when I react, like, cognitively, and I say, okay, I know this is the first step in my feeling. I need to remove myself, and so that is kind of where I've been able to progress through my own issues. Is I know the warning signs now, and I know that I can't let it get to step 2 and step 3, and step 4 is probably jail. So you can't, you have to identify what your own personal steps are, and create that mental boundary and say, I'm gonna, once I feel this step, it's over with. I got to get out of here.
Yeah. And that's that black and white thinking, like, it's where people with BPD, it's that split, either all good or all bad. So being able to remove yourself to realize there's gray, because I'm one of those that I'll just, you can be the best person, the best doctor, whatever. And then once something happens, I'm like, you're the worst. I'm going to, write a review. And, it can be just the complete opposite, because for some reason it's that, I don't think you like me, so I'm going to leave you before you leave me scenario. And then typically I apologize, not so much because I even am sorry, but because I'm afraid you're going to leave the situation. And so I would rather just apologize so that they stay. It's a mind. I wish there was some easy fix to it, but like you said, a lot of it's a change in thinking, a change in, response. Like, it's not really a change in your reality, because that still stays skewed in my opinion, but
no, you're right. Yeah, it's definitely my thought process doesn't, or the way my brain reacts to it doesn't change. It's just I put this boundary in that I change my physical environment, but I still go through the process. I just try to do it alone, where I can't do any damage to nothing. And and that's just taking myself and putting myself in a neutral environment. Chances are, by the time I get there, I'm good enough to where I can just breathe and just say, okay.
Because that's learning how to deal with, like, the instability of relationships. Like, that's a big thing with BPD. So it's like, how can we have positive relationships and not be toxic to other people? And like you said, it's that stepping away, getting back into a sane, frame to where I can effectively communicate, because if not, then I'm providing a toxic environment where anybody that I loved, I wouldn't want them and wouldn't advise them to stay in a situation, where someone just blows up at me with no reason and then tells me it's my thinking that's wrong, because you've got to be very careful. And personal accountability, or it can kind of be gaslighting. It's making someone else question their own reality because my reality was different than the actual situation. So you can drive people crazy if you can't figure out healthy ways. And I think when you talk about the dark side, that is the dark side of it to me, is when the people around you feel really crazy because now you've made them feel away. Because at least for me, my response and the people that I know, the responses do not fit the situation to where the other person thinks that they can never do anything right, And so that's, to me, like a hard side of loving somebody with BPD, is the fact that my emotions are changing all the time. And that's a circus, to be on. So, yeah, instability in relationships is a big one.
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, you're gonna have partners that are gonna look at you and they're gonna go, there are way easier ways to do relationships than this. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy to be with people that suffer through BPD. It is absolutely not. When you're a neurotypical and you're just cruising through life on a plain slate, it's hard to deal with someone with BPD because, like you said, they're doing this all the time, and it makes it hard for someone who is living in a normal kind of monotone world to keep up with someone who's constantly up and down, and we're drowning and then we're high. We're drowning, then we're high. It's hard. It's a hard thing to deal with. And it makes me very weary of getting into relationships because I don't want to drag somebody through that. And so I'm at least cautious enough to know that I can't keep torturing my partners with this. They don't deserve that. And I mean, I'm far enough down the road to where I understand my issues and I have control over them. But I still, my emotions are still, like you said, one minute you're dealing with something, and the next minute, I turn on clients at work sometimes like that, and I'll be like, it'll be a great conversation. They say one little trigger thing I don't like, and I'm like, I'm done. You can walk yourself out. And so I'm like,
yeah,
I'm done with you. That's it.
And I have to just put those things in place. Like for me now, because I am like that, when I go to things that I know I'm passionate about with work, I have friends that I trust or coworkers. Well, I'll sit beside them and they'll tap my leg. Like if I start to get, like my tone starts to get up, or, because I don't realize I'm doing it, and people look at it as aggressive or condescending. People that know me better, they'll say, you're just very assertive, but it's a turnoff. To certain things. And it can definitely get in the place of being able to rise in the ranks. I've been told a lot, I have the intelligent part, the emotional maturity is where I always lack, where other people can kind of keep it together. They do something wrong or something disappoints them, they can accept it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. How did that happen? It's so over the top and compared to my peers, so it's caused me to lose, some promotions over it, because I just handle things well when I'm disappointed. So.
Right. And so Jen, remind us, is there a cure for BPD?
Like you said, with the EMDR, there is things where you can change, like they say, your synapses, like the way that your brain fires, Another part that I truly believe in, what I work on, is working with the complex PTSD, because a lot of the responses of borderlines is based on a trigger. Like they say there's 4 different types of borderline. I wrote them down just so I don't forget. But they say like the first one is a high functioning. So they say, with them, they have like despair, fragility, abandonment crisis, like prior to trauma. They tend to internalize it with like suicidal thoughts. So they can feel like more of the depression and negative states, but they're more the self-destructive, you know, they may cut, they may do things like that. They think they're the worst ever, you know, just a burden. Then they had the histrionic, but they also they don't like, it's not a word that they like to use anymore. So petulant is a word that they use more, but that's someone who's more like attention seeking and dysregulated, more of like the manipulative, victimized entitlement part. They said, you know, not being able to tolerate not getting your way, throwing tantrums, you know, and a lot of that is also like being visibly uncomfortable, not being in the center of attention, and kind of having that every day can be a different personality. You know, like if I dress this way, I can be this person. If I do this, I can do this. Then they said there's the angry, externalizing, impulsive. So they can overlap with the narcissistic disorder, which is a lot of the rage, like the yelling, the screaming. And it said that most of that comes from like just a distolerance to not be able to control a setting. So they said that a lot of that one is the externalized impulsivity and acting out, you know, the drugs, driving dangerously, spending, sex, you know, like the mania, which that's why a lot of these ones will get the bipolar like diagnosis, because it does seem to be like a mania. And then when they come down, it can be more suicidal thoughts. And then the other one is more of the depressive internalizing, like self-defeating, can't hold down jobs, you know, typical like dysphoria, can't take care of themselves. Maybe the ones that can't bathe, can't get out and do things, get their meds filled, those sort of things. So for me, when I think of like if somebody can cure themselves of it, I think it's multifaceted. Like if I was, you know, I tend to be more in the either mad or like I'm in the two middle ones where they're probably like WTF Jen, you know, but for me, when I look at it, I can try to, you know, not drinking. I can, you know, I start watching on the road because I am one of those that drive dangerously. Absolutely. Like when I listen to this stuff, it's like, oh crap, you know, but I watch trying to, you know, not speed. You know, if I am upset on the road, I try not to go drive or stuff, you know. So to me, do I think it's curable? I think you can heal to the level I think all of us can heal. You know, I think so many people have some sort of emotional, some sort of something that's happened to them that affects whether it's their eating, you know, OCD, whatever it is, you know. And to me, healing or overcoming something is just what can be my norm. Like I may have an impulse control problem, but I can check my balance every day. I can, like me, I don't really go into stores. I order things online so I can check and make sure like I'm just not throwing stuff in the cart. You know, if I have a manic part where I want to go shop a lot, I'll go thrift. You know, like there's things that I've done where I can adjust what my impulses are and at least be able to get it into the most healthy way possible. You know, for me, you know, not dating, cutting off family of trauma. Like I cut off most of my family, you know, because you're only going to be as healthy as the people you're around, in my opinion. So for me, in order to not have instability in my relationships, I don't have chaotic relationships in my life. You know, if they're unhealthy in any way, I'm not doing it, you know. So for me, I've made my circle around people that I truly trust and I know have my best interest at heart. So I feel people that I'm not getting triggered by cheating men or this or that or the other. Like I've made my circle of people that I truly trust. And that is where they say, you know, BPD, it's that feeling of you're defective or the feeling of entitlement, you know, someone's going to let you down. So for me, healing is, well, I have control of who I keep myself around. I can make sure I have a doctor I trust. I can make sure I have a therapist or mentors I trust. So do I think it can be completely healed? I'd like to say so, but I think it's just emotional maturity. I mean, as much as you can, you know, accept personal responsibility and, you know, I don't know. I hope I can get to a point where I know that I have healthy relationships. I started with friendships. I have friends that you know, that I trust that talk to me if I'm out of line, you know, and so I gauge that towards like relationships. You know, my friends tell me if out of line. I'm able to maintain friendships. I don't respond out of line, so to me,
yeah,
it's baby steps, I don't know. I may be alone forever. Who knows? I'm pretty sure that I'm okay either way. I'm okay with the
right.
people I have in my life, like either way. And they say, I think that I failed over some parts of it because they say BPD people do not have a sense of self. And that's not something I used to feel that way, but I don't feel that way today. So
Right.
there's some things I can definitely say I used to have feelings like that I no longer feel like that today.
Right. I mean, that's a progress. And like you said, baby steps, you're working on just regular, friendship relationships. There's no better practice for yourself than that.
Mhm.
So, that's productive. And I want to go back to what you said. So there's a difference, a vast difference between curable and treatable. And I think when we're looking at BPD, the curable part is just not going to be there, where it's how you treat,
Mhm.
and whether you learn to self-treat or you have a combination between a therapist and self-treating, in positive ways, of course. I mean, we don't want to self-treat with alcohol and drugs, but
Mhm.
so I think there's that kind of definitive, that's the bad part about just about it. I mean, like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, all these, they have no cure. And it's all about how you treat, whether you self-treat or have the help of others or physicians or whatnot, or medications. I'm not a medication kind of guy, so I depend on my self-treating and the help of some of my peers that are in the psychiatric field.
Mhm.
So that's always been a big help. Although I know a lot of people don't have the resources that I have, but there
Or
are
just whatever
resources.
works for you. I think, like with BPD and stuff like that, they're so multifaceted to where some people, may need medications for other parts. Some people may have more of the OCD or the ADHD parts of
Yeah.
it, so there's so many different components that I feel, to me, the emotional part, like you said, there's no magic pill for the emotional side of it. That's a learned behavior, that's a practice behavior. I think sometimes if people do have, some of the ADHD, I do know for me, they used to say, oh, you have anxiety, anxiety, anxiety. Finally, I said, well, can we work on some ADHD? Like, I really feel like this might be my avenue. And so once we started going on that, a lot of things in my life lessened, because it wasn't anxiety. It was the fact that my brain processes so quick, that I really get overstimulated. And I do think, complex PTSD and BPD, I think they all play together, but there are
Oh yeah.
medications that can at least slow the brain down enough for me to feel like I have a choice in response to being like, what just happened? I don't even know what I said. Like, where did that
Right.
come from? I feel like at least there's been some medications that has got my brain to at least slow down so that I can make choices. So, like you said, there's so many different parts of it. That's why I like working with the doctor, like you said, knowing people in the mental health field and not self diagnosing. That's something where it takes prolonged time with people to really get a good handle. And I think, it's hard for people with BPD to trust. And that's why I always tell people when I mentor and stuff with them, try as many as you need to. Like you said, it's a
Oh
dark
yeah.
path. It's a dark path. Some of the things you talk about, you need to feel safe, and so I've been told in everything that I do in recovery and trying to heal from things is number one in BPD is that you feel safe. So in any
Yeah.
situation, am I going to feel safe to say the most vulnerable things? Am I going to be able to come back the next week? To me, that's true healing because I can't hide under a facade. I have to see you and hold myself accountable because I'm very good at manipulating or getting my way in things. So you can't do that forever. The real you's going to come out soon, and
Right.
to me, that's where you're going to show a willingness to heal is, are you going to put people in place in your life that you can have healthy relationships and teach yourself how to do that in a productive way, If not, you're going to continue to hurt people without any realization, which will probably end in result of suicide, is a very high probability of people with BPD. So there's only so much shame I think people can do. And if you don't get a handle on your mental health and you don't reach out for help, you can get in a dark place really quickly.
Oh yeah. I had an immense amount of guilt that I just could not get through. And it took me a long time to just dump the guilt. And it just ate at me every day. It was like 1,000-pound weight on me, on top of me all day, every day. And, and that was from abandonment. Like I got abandoned. And so I had this guilt that came right after the abandonment feeling came, then boom, this guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was difficult. And I didn't have an answer for it for a while. And so I think that, when you get into these real, first you go through the phases, there's the shock, and then you go through the anger and the rage, and then you come through, and then, you've got this guilt that just festers. And when you have BPD, it makes it times 10. It's not gonna, it's not like a normal, neurotypical where you're like, okay, well, I'll give me a couple of days and then I'll be fine. No, it doesn't work like that. This guilt, it just eats at you like a flesh eating bacteria. And it's just, you gotta find a way.
Like you said, like if I respond and behave in a way that does not make sense, everybody's going to want to pull away from that. No one knows how to respond to that. Well, the fact that you pulled away, my response is, well, now I want to chase after you, and I want you to tell me it's okay. Well, some behavior is just not okay. So I'm asking someone to compromise their boundaries, and they say, any therapist will say the number one thing with people with BPD is you better have concrete boundaries, because I'm going to try to push them every which way or another, and not because I intentionally do it, but just because my mood is so unstable that other people's who are more stable, I'm like, well, you're still mad. Like I was only mad for 10 minutes. Now you're mad for a half a day. Now you're not talking to me, and I don't know what to do because now I don't think that you like me anymore, and you're going to break up with me because I haven't heard from you for an hour. And why are you reading my message and not respond? Now I may drive by your house. So it becomes like a whole cycle. And I've realized not everybody gets crazy like that. Like, right. And it wasn't
I did
that around other people where they're like, Jen, like other people don't drive by people's houses. Like, this is very, you're looking for someone to do something wrong. You're setting people up to fail. And that's where I had to realize I had to take a step back from dating, because I look at them to screw me over. Right. And that's not fair to anybody. So like you said, there's a dark side of it, that unfortunately it's hard to explain to people, and it's hard for people to want to be around.
Yeah. If I'm talking to one of my daughters, I'm going to tell them to stay away from people like us. Absolutely. Like it's going to end in disaster. I promise you that.
It's a walking red flag.
Just turn around and go the other way.
Yes.
I know you love them, but I promise. I'll always keep the spare bedrooms always available because you're going to need it.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's the accountability part of life. It's having someone to keep you grounded in reality. And I truly think, that's the biggest thing, whether it's, grounding techniques like with EMDR, that's a big part of it, is, learning how to ground yourself in no matter what environment you're in by getting yourself into a conscious state of relaxing. And so, meditation, any of those things, I know people that go to the bathroom, they keep pennies in their pocket, or they do I have rings that I do. Like there's just certain things, because I'm very uncomfortable and I fidget all the time. Like I can't sit still in anything. It's like the kid at a church that just, I just can't help it. But now that I'm aware that I do that, I try to make a conscious effort to be present, because I struggle very hard
Right.
with paying attention.
So we kind of call, and you'll know this, those are kind of coping skills. And I did want to talk. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I did want to bring up coping skills today, because there's a lot of people out there that have some of the issues that we've been talking about, but maybe they haven't been properly diagnosed. And until they can get the help that they need, I think them learning these tiny little coping skills. I have mine. I will get up every morning after I'm done brushing my teeth, and I will take 30 seconds and I'll look at myself in the mirror and I will say, "Who are you today?" And I look at myself in the eyes and admit who I am for the day. If I'm an asshole, I'm an asshole today. If I'm feeling good, I'll see it in myself and I'll say, today's going to be a good day. And so I have to face myself every morning.
See, and what I was to do was 5 times in the morning, you look in yourself in the mirror and you say, "I love you." So
Ooh,
2 different ways. I'll tell you what, the first couple times I did it, like, I got tears in my eyes. There's something to it. It makes me uncomfortable when I do it, but something with most borderlines is that feeling of defective. And so my therapist has told me, you have to retrain your brain, because if I love me, then I feel better. I don't need a validation from other people. And that's the biggest part of, borderline, is that constant need for validation. So not getting in relationships can help, because you're learning to validate yourself. So that way, no matter what, I know what I bring to the table, the good and the bad, and I feel okay if it doesn't work out. I'm going to be okay, as to where an untreated person with BPD may self-harm to say, "Please don't leave me. I'm going to kill myself if you leave." So there's 2 different ways that someone can handle it. And over time, as you heal, you will see a progression of, I used to feel like I was going to die if this person left me. I'm just a piece of crap. I got to beg for them not to leave me, to the point to say, you know what, I've got my flaws, but I've got good things too. At least I'm willing to work on mine. So if you don't see it, I got no problem finding the good and goodbye. So I've also learned over time to have a lot of self-confidence too. I may not be of everybody's cup of tea, but but a lot of people like to be around me too. So, it's not a death sentence.
Right.
It's just it weeds out the people that are there for certain things. Like, that's the way I look at it. Unconditional love is at your worst and your best, in spite of. So I'd rather, date somebody any day that's trying to work on themselves than somebody that's stuck in, their own ways, that doesn't feel like they could benefit from any help at all. So, like you said, the grounding things, if you can't afford a therapist, the journaling, having a mentor, having someone you regularly see, even if it's a friend, to where you are having some base in reality, yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. Because if I get in my head, I could say that everybody's out to get me, and they're going to, be committed, somebody's one step away from, gonna, so that's the thing about it. To me, it's living in reality.
Right. And I'm going to jump over into the comments, because Rob asked a good question. He says, "What happens if the day puts the screws to you?" That's always a possibility. You can't be 100% perfectly prepared for everything every day. So if you wake up, like if I wake up and I know I'm going to have a good day, but then something happens throughout the course of the day, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you that every once in a while, you may have to mask. You may have to find something that temporarily gets you a mask until you can calm down and come up with a real solution. So when I have days like that, what I do, and I don't want to make it sound like this is such a dramatic thing, because it's really not. If I know I'm having a bad day, instead of calling somebody that I know is going to try to tell me everything's okay, and I'm not trying to hear that right now, I'm going to continue working. I'm going to find something to do. I'm going to go do yard work where I'm by myself and I can just focus on forgetting and masking past what the problem is. And I'm just going to ignore it the rest of the day, and I'll deal with it tomorrow when I've had some time to process. Sometimes that helps. I'm not saying that that has to be your go-to, because obviously eventually it's just like how people drink to forget their problems. Well, guess what? When they wake up the next day, the problems are still there. Mm-hmm. So it's the same kind of concept. And yeah. I mean,
for me, basically we do what I do, and it's helped. It's a recovery thing, but it's also in just healing in general. But they call it a 4-step in AA or any type of recovery process. But it's removing yourself from the situation, because for me it's about grounding myself in reality. So who am I upset with? Like, okay, Sandy from work. Okay, well, what did they do? Well, she made me feel like I was dumb by like cutting me off when I was talking or whatever. Okay, well, what did it affect? Well, it made me feel stupid and down around my friends or my peers. I look dumb in front of my boss. Okay, well, what did I do? Well, I'm letting my emotions get to me, or I could wait and send up an email later, maybe wanting to say the rest of what I said. So for me, it's stopping what's going on, because I feel powerless now. I feel like the victim. I feel, how am I going to get what I want out of this situation? I'm mad at Sandy. I want to quit my job because they don't appreciate what I'm saying. So sometimes for me, getting out of it and saying, okay, what am I upset about? Because mainly it's fear that I'm not good enough. And so what is my choice? Right. My choice is maybe I could get with Sandy and figure out how to collaboratively work to where I feel validated and being included. So for me, I address it right when it happens, because I need to figure out what can I do to release this feeling. Because for me, someone who does like maybe have like more self-destructive tendencies, I'm not going to sit on it, because before the end, I'm probably going to send you a 3-page scathing note of why I hate everything about you and I hope you die. So yeah. I have to address like the insanity of what I'm thinking right then. What is it making me feel like? Why am I feeling like that? And what can I do? So a lot of times if I feel like that, I text somebody, like a friend of mine. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Because if I can get out of myself and I can get past, okay, what can I do for somebody else? Then I get out of my own way and I get to, be able to be productive to somebody, because it can change in an instant. I can reset at any time. But first, I think, is seeing the fact that I am crazy in my thinking. Like what I'm thinking is not okay. It doesn't mean what the other person did is right. It just means I have two choices. I can end up being the crazy one that looks crazy in the end, because I'm not going to know when to stop. Or I can figure out how to take personal responsibility and come up with a solution that is tangible. So I don't know. I went out and worked in the yard. I probably cut everything in sight and then run through the yard with the car. Like now it's mowed. There's no yard. So
yeah, how you like that?
Mm-hmm.
It's mowed now.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my.
I mean, I totally get that. I have this problem that I think maybe 10 years ago I realized that this is a behavior that I do. But I have found that when something happens and I'm triggered and I can feel that, I get high off of that. And so I can't exert that at some points because my energy gets so high and it's disastrous. So I have to, for me, it works I have to go do something else and let that energy go away. Mm-hmm. And it's productive for me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you leave me in the heat of the battle, I'm going to be a disaster.
Yeah. And like you said, it depends too. Cause if I want to fight, like one thing is like with my daughter, like she wants to walk away, but I'm like, no, like I want to feel this. So like, I get what you're saying. Like I can be addicted to the chaos of it all. And just that feeling of releasing whatever is in me, right. And while I love the feeling, it's one of those things, like you said, the devastation, sometimes walking away is the best thing to do, or, whatever it is for you to be able to get away and not cause harm, calm down and be able to come back and be effective. whatever that is,
Right.
you know. So as long as it's not detrimental to yourself
Yeah.
or others, you know.
Right. But yeah, because my mentality in that moment is, if okay, you wanted the wrath, you're gonna get the wrath. And so I have to identify that way ahead of time. Like, this isn't gonna end how I think it's gonna end. And I need to just go somewhere and be by myself for a minute. And and,
Whoever
and
your
I'm
person,
getting to the yeah, I'm getting better at it. It's easy for me to go, you know what? I'm gonna go up in my office. Nobody come up there, please. Nobody come to my office for a while.
Mhm.
I'm good. Just leave me alone.
Mhm.
And then
And
usually I'll
trying
come
new
back out.
things.
Yeah, I'll come out and in about 20 minutes and I'll go, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and
And
like you said, you had a commenter down there. It is really trying to see which ones work for you, trying different things. Like some people, like I have a friend, she did EMDR and like she thrives on like working out twice a day. Like if she doesn't do it, she started kickboxing because she had that aggression in her that she needed to get out. You know, it's like the first time I ever went and punched a bag, like one of those punching bags. I cried because it was the first time I had ever punched anything after so many years of being punched on, that it was like
yeah,
I could never bring myself to ever be in a fight, but there was something so releasing in that moment. So, you know, you said that you had someone that was commenting on it, and for me it's trying a variety of different things, you know. I did some self healing ones where they did like meditation in conjunction with working out. So it was a lot of like affirmations, like mantras that you would build yourself. And then as you were working out, you know, like mine was like, I can do hard things. I'm the strongest person I'll ever know. And so when things got hard, you know, I can push through that, like going hiking, things that I would never imagine I would do by myself. And in those
right,
moments of wanting to give up, like I can do hard things. So for me, a lot of things with BPD is like learning to be okay being alone and learning how to love yourself to where you don't have that shame and fear of abandonment. So,
yeah, yeah. That's abandonment is a mug. Let me tell you, that's a killer.
yeah.
My trick that's my trigger. My mom died at a young age, and so she was 47, and I was a dumb, young 20-year-old, and so I didn't have my nurturer. And then I had issues with my sister. She left. Then I had a wife left, another wife left. So my triggers revolve around abandonment,
Mhm.
and so that eats at my soul. And so that's something. Unfortunately, it's something I'm starting to understand how to deal with. But because I've had it happen so many times, I
Mhm.
kind of know what to do.
Mhm.
Um, but it doesn't feel good, and that's probably my biggest trigger. And I know everyone who has BPD has their own trigger, something that really sets you off more than the others.
Mhm.
um
And
it just
abandonment
depends on.
is the number one, you know, thing with BPD. It's either abandonment because I'm not good enough, or, you know, I'm defective, something's wrong with me. You know, it's the whole
Right,
core belief that if I was something different, you wouldn't leave. If I could be this, then you would
right,
stay. So, you know, that's the number one thing that distinguishes it from other disorders, you know, is the fact
right,
that that is the one where the emotions make the situation. You know, it's an emotional
yeah,
driven, and because of the feelings and the behavior so irrational and doesn't make sense, I think it makes perfect sense that abandonment is the direct result of, because nobody would want to be around somebody that acts like that, you know. So your behavior dictates people wanting to be around you. It's almost like the whole thing, like I'll break up with you before you break up with me scenario. I'll quit my job before you fire me. It's that whole thing of wanting to feel like you have control because of the fact that the behavior is so out of bounds that I'm going to turn around and blame it on you, you know. So to me, that's the most ridiculous part about it, is trying to convince someone else that they're at fault for the way they made me feel, when in no way was my behavior indicative of what it should have been, So
Right.
to me, that's the hardest part about it, especially employment, stuff like that. It's very hard for me to explain why I'm crying at a time that it is not appropriate to cry.
Right.
So the fact that they say borderline can be very childlike, I think in a lot of areas that is where it's very childlike, because the emotions don't match the situation, whether it's sad, angry, whatever the situation is, it usually does not fit the line of what the situation is.
Right. I think that those are all that's all extremely valid information, and I hope that that people going through these things, hopefully we've provided a few tactics and few coping skills that people can try and see if they work for them. It doesn't matter the amount of therapy that I've ever had to go through for this. It doesn't de-intensify it. I'm just as BPD from the beginning as what I was now, so it did. Therapy is good. I enjoy therapy. I get to talk these emotions and feelings out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to stop the next thing. Cause my thought process, it doesn't change. My reaction to things doesn't change. It's my reaction to those reactions is what I've had to kind of dance around those things to kind of de-intensify. So it's yeah. And Rob, you're right. You have to own it. That was one of the biggest things. And I didn't own it at first. And that's when I was fighting it. And that makes it worse. So once I realized that I have to face this and I have to own it, and that changed the whole game for me. It took probably 50% of the intensity off.
Well, and that's where the therapy comes in, because the therapy is what points out the fact that this doesn't make sense. Like when you're in therapy and someone says, okay, and what was your behavior? And then I explain how I responded. And then it's like, no, that's not okay. So for me, I do change behavior, but that's when I can see that it's apparent that that is not working for me. Like, if I immediately want to be defensive and explain it this way, that doesn't work. So I've had to learn different things, like you said, personal responsibility. And then also every person's different. So do they have space to talk this out with me? Is that, I have to see when is a good time for them, because for me, it's me. You made me feel this way. I need to not feel this way. Now I want to fix it. And I've had to learn that that's not up to me. Like I have to learn to be patient. I have made a situation and I'm not in control of how that goes, but as long as I remain taking responsibility. But for me, that is being around people that can call me out on my BS. Like I don't sit there and rationalize it myself, because if I do it in my own head, I've convinced myself I was right. But if I, have myself accountable to other people, whether it's journaling, whatever it is, one other person that I go and talk to, they can let me know, because it is a change in behavior, and being able to see that you are very, very inappropriate in your responses and behavior. And that's unacceptable. And so how can I do it different? And as long as I'm always trying to do better, that's all you can ask from anybody, is just to accept your responsibility for your behavior, see what you're doing wrong, see what that relationship in your life needs for it to be healthy on both ends, and make a conscious effort every day to get up and do that. And I think that's what the norm or non-norm people have to do every day, is put one foot in front of the other. Try every day to be the best person you can be. What are my character defects? What are my flaws? How can I make sure I'm aware of those today? And when I veer off path, because we all do, how can I genuinely try to make that right? And I think people with BPD also do have a sincerity of caring about what other people think, sometimes to a fault.
Oh, yeah.
That when you put it in the right productive way, other people feel heard and seen and loved, because of the fact that we do have those other tenants that are hyper-focused in someone's emotions, that we do meet other people's emotional needs a lot of times. So for me, it's that constant hyper-vigilance and hyper-awareness of myself. and having those open communications and genuine relationships in my life that they can tell me when I've overstepped, or
Right.
when I have not respected their boundaries. And you can only hurt people so many times and get left so many times before you see the error of your ways and you see what needs to be done and who's at fault. So
right. I've completely destroyed relationships.
mm-hmm.
I have been horrid. And that was before I really kind of faced it and faced myself and accepted that this is me and this is the issue. And I have to own this and I have to put in some work to get better. Mm-hmm. And so, since I've been able to do that, my friendships have been better. Everything has just been so much better.
I get to be a better friend and I don't bring chaos into their lives.
Right.
And I get to be able to be there for them, because I've been able to see when the chaos starts coming for me, I jump ship. Like if I start to see it be chaotic, I'm just like, you know what? Other people can deal with that kind of stuff in their life. I can't. Like it's not an emotionally safe place for me to be. And that's where I've had to learn, like I'm naturally attracted to, I guess, people with narcissistic tendencies. Those are the two worst combinations in the world. Like it says almost every therapist I've ever listened to, they're attracted to each other, but they are the worst. You got one who says, I don't need anybody. And you got the other one saying, I need to be needed. So one is completely, the other one lacks empathy and the other one needs validation, and so learning about myself and learning about things gives me that power to know, hey, I took off my rose-colored glasses and I know me. And so when I see somebody that's a certain way, I'm like, for your own safety, I'm just not going to do that, because I don't surround myself with anybody that's going to take me outside of the character of the person that I want to be. So I'm not going to be around people that are not trustworthy people and then wonder why I'm paranoid and don't trust them. I don't live a life where I put myself with people that I have to constantly feel validated. I see myself with people that say, hey, I'm sorry I made you feel like that, Jen. I value how you feel. Like those things, I have great relationships today, like with my friends or anything, because I value them and what they say. And I have a safe place that if I'm hurt, I can say, hey, that hurt my feelings. And even though maybe it was something stupid at work, I told my friend, why didn't you have my back? We're at work. Why did I feel, but her response to me was, hey, Jen, I'm sorry I made you feel like that. Those are good friends. Right. And you surround yourself with people like that. And life is, you don't feel crazy. Like most days, I don't feel like I'm any different than anybody else. I just know that, hey, I have to be a little bit more hyper aware that how I make other people feel.
Yeah. I have that same kind of issue. I have to remember I got to tone it down sometimes. My normal is a little bit more uptick than most people's normal. So I have to remember when I communicate with people that I gotta kind of.
I work from home, so it's worked out very well for me since I've started remote because I can take those breaks. Not everybody sees my face, so I'm on the phone. I can take a couple minutes before my phone calls. I didn't do well in a work setting in other settings where people could see me. I couldn't take a break. I would want to be just walk out and quit. So I have had to adapt jobs that I know are good for me, that I don't have to be micromanage what I'm doing every minute of the day. Right. If I need to turn on some music is my thing. Like music will change me out of any mood, so I found jobs and friends and pretty much my whole atmosphere that is what I need. So I always encourage people to even if it's going to therapy, to figure out what you need and what's most important to you, or make a list of what's most important to you and just try to find a life that is fulfilling in those areas, because this other stuff works out a lot of times if we can figure out who we are, that we're okay being ourselves and what is the life I want to make for me, not anybody else. And to me, that's been the whole healing process for me, was when I finally was like, what do I like? And I realized, I don't know. I didn't know I was such a chameleon around other people. So I just encourage people, take the time to learn you, make make mistakes, have failures, learn. That's how we learn, and love yourself. I mean, nobody's perfect, like you get one life. You can live a life beating yourself up, or you can live a life where you're constantly learning and just learning how to love yourself and have fun. So,
and that's probably the best message we can end this show on. Just learn to love yourself, and it's going to make all the difference in the world.
Yep, you're never alone.
Right. But that is going to be our show for the day. Thanks, Jen, for coming on again, and hopefully we can keep having you back because it's a lot of fun talking to you on here. Rob, thanks for jumping in the comments, and we will see you next Monday, and I will probably announce whatever it is we're going to talk about as soon as I figure out what that is. But
have a great night.
See you, everybody.